This is when I actually thought I was going to be able to get the engine running before tearing the tractor completely apart. Every exhaust valve was stuck and stuck hard. I was spraying these several times a day, tapping them with a hammer. The intake's freed up fairly easily. The exhaust just solid as a rock. After several days of trying to move these exhaust valves, I finally broke some of the heads off and actually drove them out down through guide and all. Intake valves are all in. Took a while to get the exhaust valves. They had a weird, I think they were 11/32 stem, but they were neck down to 5/16 at the keeper end. It's definitely starting to look a lot better than it did when I first took it apart. I forgot to mention, I did all new guides. The guides were hammered out and the new ones hammered in. Like I say, the intakes are all done, just waiting for the exhaust. This is the exhaust valve keeper and spring. The intakes used a simple pin, but the exhaust used a tapered lock and this hat up on top of the spring. New wheel cylinders installed. This is still when I thought I'd be able to drive it before I took it all apart to paint it, but with my back I was running out of time in order to be able to paint. This is the rear wheel drum, full floating axle, 1.5 ton rear end, 6.6 to 1 ratio. This is just the back side of the backing plate, which I ended up pulling when I started the restoration. Just a closer look at the wheel cylinder installed. These next few frames are just the tractor sitting on the lift. I was working on it in the shop, get out of the hot sun. But I think at this point I was still thinking that I could get it running and be able to drive it up and down the driveway at least before I took it all apart to restore the tractor. So, as I approached September, the reality was that I was not going to be able to drive this before taking it apart, that I would just start taking it apart. This is just a black and white photograph, make it look like an old-timey picture. This is just a close-up of the clutch linkage. I took a lot of pictures more for assembly. I mean, to have a record of how things fit together, because I knew it would be a while before I was able to get this thing back together. At this point, I knew I was looking at the fall and summer, and that's provided my back cooperates. This is the rear end and the transmission output. They were connected with a double roller chain. I'm not sure what date this was, but at some point I decided, alright, we're going to have to pull the engine and transmission to take a look at that. I don't think at this point I had dove into the rear end yet, realizing what a mess that was. The decision to pull the transmission and engine assembly was because I couldn't get it apart in the tractor. I mean, things were coupled up so close together. In order to pull any component, it had to be out. So at this point we decided we're going to look at the tranny and the clutch and the steering gear and all its associated parts. These next two frames are just a picture of the steering gear up close. I think even though it doesn't show very well in the next two pictures, this is more of a reference on the spacers and how that steering gear was bolted to the bracket, which was bolted to the top cover of the transmission. Now this is the back of the tranny. If you can see that sprocket, you'll notice there's no nut on it. I found that floating, and I'm sure that's why the back of that tranny was covered with oil. I explain later how it works and why I think the oil was coming out on that end. These next few pictures are just, again, for reference. Dashboard, how the air cleaner was bolted to it. This had a remote fuel filter. That's that canister there, that small metal canister is a flow-through fuel filter. This is still a gravity feed system. Tank was over the engine, gravity feed to the carburetor. This is just the right side of the transmission, and you see that steering gear support bracket above it. There's slots in that so you can change the angle of the steering wheel, make it closer or further away from you. This is just a picture of the back side of the dashboard. Starter solenoid there, mounted to the back of it. And I think this also had a regulator at one time, because there obviously was a generator and somebody converted it to an alternator. This is just the left side of the tranny. Just another shot. Not sure what reference I was trying to accomplish or what, but I was taking a lot of pictures for Facebook on the Worthington tractor site. So this is just starter, oil filter, alternator, left side of the engine. Yeah, this is just the engine assembly as I took it out of the tractor, sitting on a pallet. First job was to get that radiator support away from the front of the engine and the steering gear. Here again, just took the gear off. I mean, it felt good with no pressure on it, but as soon as you put a load on it, there was obviously a problem inside this gearbox. This turned out to be a Saginaw steering box, and the lower bearing had just totally fallen apart. So this is just after cleanup, trying to figure out what I could get for parts and how I was going to move forward with the repair. This is the lower end. There was a special cup style bearing in that, and that's how you adjusted your preload on the rack, by turning that big nut in on the lower end of the box. This is the new bearing. It took a lot of digging on the internet to find it, but Saginaw used this in quite a few of their manual steering boxes. So again, everything seemed like it took forever. You can see how that sits on the end of the worm gear, and that sits into that cup, the big nut, and that's how you adjust the preload on that worm. Then there was a separate adjustment for the output shaft, the pitman shaft. All back together. So this is the first of many things where I was going to have to get parts for. I didn't know what was coming. The rear end was a surprise and a disaster. Removed the radiator. So this is just starting to figure out what I was going to approach next. And I almost think I dove into the rear end before I pulled the transmission and clutch assembly out of this. This is just the radiator sitting on its mount, and it's been removed from the front of the engine. This is that bracket that actually retained the oil seal for the output shaft of the transmission and held the steering gear. Quite a complicated little bracket. This is just the seal. Again, number was there for reference. This is the output shaft of the transmission. That sleeve on there, again, is where that seal runs. But there's also an oil O-ring behind that, which I hadn't realized yet, that kept oil from running down the shaft, following the splines out and throwing all over the back of the tractor. All right, so let me see if I can explain this a little better. This is the output shaft of the transmission. There's the rear bearing. There's the inner race. This hub, which is roughly 2-inch OD, see that internal snap ring, O-ring, that's made to come up tight against this inner race. So that goes on, slides down tight. So that keeps oil from following the splines down. Then the bracket, which I can't hold up there, it's super heavy. This is the steering box bracket. This bolts to the back of the transmission and to the rear, one of the cross members in the tractor itself. But you can see this is the side that's up against the transmission. There's a gasket there, and this holds the seal, which would be the same thing as if this transmission had a tail shaft on it. This seal would be up against the yoke, whatever you want to call it, for the drive shaft. But since the transmission is coupled right up tight to the rear end, this bracket actually retains the seal. So that seal runs on this hub, right here. So picture this big bracket in place. So gasketed to the back of the tranny. Oil can't get past that. Oil can't run down the splines. Oil can't go by this seal up here. So then this is the drive coupling for the tractor. This goes right up against the pinion on the tractor, has one of these as well. And it drives on a double roll roller chain. So this, when I took it apart, was just floating. And I said, well, that must be intentional, because maybe, depending on transmission location or rear end location, they wanted this to float. But once I got it apart, without this nut cinching this down tight, oil was going past that O-ring and following the splines down. The whole rear cross member was wet with gear oil. So I assumed the seal was bad. What I think was happening is oil was going past that O-ring, following the splines out and then getting whipped. So this needed to have a nut and a washer on it cinched up tight in order to control oil coming out of the tranny. Well, I said, that's no problem. 7/8 castle nut can't be that hard to find. The problem is it was a 16 pitch instead of a 14, which is a normal 7/8. So started looking on the internet, couldn't find anything. Out of desperation, last night I just plugged in, I don't know, something Ford output shaft or something like that, and I came up with actually a pinion nut made to go on the rear end of a vehicle with a 7/8 16 pitch. So I ordered that. It was $3.50. The shipping was like $8. I mean, otherwise, if I didn't find a 16 pitch, you can't buy a tap. So I was actually going to have to internally thread one on the lathe. There's no way of testing your fit. So once you took it out of the lathe, you were never going to get it back in the same place. So if it didn't fit this shaft thread on good, you were going to have to start all over again. So I was really dreading that. But now that I found a pinion nut, and it may take a week or two to get here, but I don't care. $3.50. I couldn't cut off the piece of steel that I need to make a nut for that kind of money. So glad I found it. I will have to fabricate a washer. I really think it should have a washer on there. And that's just another issue solved. I looked at the engine side of the flywheel yesterday, dry as a bone, because I did have to go in and free up the clutch. I am going to separate this transmission and bell housing from the motor, and I'll stand it up on that adapter housing so the crankshaft's standing vertical when I pull the pan. But we got a few days to go before we get there. Still waiting for my hole out back to dry out. Tried walking out there a little bit yesterday, and just sink and clay sticks to your feet, and you end up making a bigger mess. I have found a pressure washer. I need to wash the block wall for the garage before I put more tar on it. I really need to get the tar on it before I wrap the perimeter pipe in stone. So obviously these 91, 92 degree days, high humidity, right out there in the sun, I'm just as glad not to have to be out there anyway. It's plenty warm working inside the garage, never mind out there. So, this may be better suited for the fall after we're done with engine shows. Not that I have that many to go to, but once the air dries out and the temperatures calm down a little, I think I could get a hell of a lot more done with a lot less stress out there. And usually by 1, 2 o'clock, my hips had about all it wants for the day anyway. So I can't get much completed in a single day anyway. So we're in hopes after the MRI that they'll give me a shot or something that'll make this better. We'll see what my MRI is scheduled for next Friday, September 3rd. So we'll go in for our eye x-ray on the 2nd in the afternoon, and then have the MRI at 7:15 on Friday. So I'm the first one, so I shouldn't be running late, I wouldn't think. So we'll see what the MRI brings, and then we'll go forward from there, I guess. That's all for today. This is just the steering gear with a coat of paint on it. This is actually one of the first pieces that I painted, and trying to get my feet wet. It's been a long time since I really had painted anything, so I was going to have to practice for sure. And it's different spraying with a gun than it is with a can. So here we go. This is probably just taken for reference to get the motor number and the serial number. This is the T9 transmission 4-speed. It would have been in a 3/4 ton Ford, late 40s. It's Wagner Gear Division, so I don't know if that was became Borg Warner or what, but there is quite a few mentions of that transmission on the internet. But I don't know. Warner Gear, I just don't recognize that name. This is just a picture of the rear axle, the pinion. You can see the sprocket on there that couples up to the transmission and how it's supported on the cross member. This is just a further off shot. Again, most of these pictures were being taken for assembly reference because I knew it was going to be a while. Just another picture showing how the frame was bolted up to that rear axle, both underneath and on top. Just another picture of the support piece to keep that rear end from wanting to roll. This is the frame outside. At this point, we certainly had decided that we were going full restoration. Going to take that this frame completely apart. Every cross member, every rail, the supports for the rear axle, all of it. Was going to totally break it down. Pull the front end out from under it. Check the kingpins. All that stuff. Not leave any bolt unturned. This is just sitting on a table that I have outside. I knew when I started taking the wire wheel to this or sander that I was going to create a lot of dust, so I decided to do this outside. You can see in the afternoon this part of the house was in the shade. That's my 63 Chevy pickup in the background. Just another picture. You know, I was going camera happy when I was taking all these pictures. Because again, you never know what you can get from a picture when you're putting the stupid thing back together 6-9 months later. Alright, here we are with the rear end. The disaster is going to unfold as we split that rear end housing. This is a Ford, so it splits clamshell style rear end. This is just a picture of the engine and adapter housing, bell housing, transmission, where I'd started to clean it up with wire brush on a grinder. That's how I did most of it. Just a close-up of the full floating axle, the spindle, and the brake shoes. Not sure what the point of that picture was. Probably just showing the bottom anchors for those shoes. Alright, the disaster has unfolded. We split this case when I realized that there was an issue with the input, the pinion. The bearings, there was no balls. That's a double roller bearing, and there wasn't any rollers in it whatsoever. So, you know, when we were pushing that thing onto the trailer, it gave no sign that there was really anything wrong with it. Didn't bind or lock up on you while you were pushing it. So this was a surprise. And this is certainly the first time for me having one of this style rear end apart. This is the half of the clamshell, and the object was to try to get a hold of that carrier bearing that's in there, and there's nothing you can get on it. So I, for the first time, actually welded a race and shrunk it, and was able to get a hold of that with a slide hammer, and it pulled right out of there. But first time I'd ever tried welding a bearing race. Always heard of it, but never had had the opportunity to try it. So me, I was just all proud that this actually worked, because there was no other way to get that out of there. This is just my setup for welding that bearing race. I needed to hold it, and the hand truck was the best way to hold it upright. Now we're back at the frame. I bounced in and out while I was waiting. Every bearing, every seal, it seemed to take forever to actually get it delivered. So now we've started actually breaking down the frame into several pieces. So this is just more of the same, taking it apart, pictures for reference, so that I knew where all these cross members bolted in, how they bolted in, what bracket was attached to what. And you'll see during the assembly process, I tried to use all new grade 8 bolts, at least for the frame, on the assembly, and I won't paint those. Once they get their clear coating, they shouldn't rust. This is what actually supports the adapter housing. The back of the engine is bolted rigid there. So I call this the second cross member. The first actually held the front end. This held the back of the transfer or the adapter housing. And then number 3 held the back of the transmission, and number 4 was the front of the rear end, and number 5 was the actual drawbar at the back of the tractor. These half moon saddles, you can see, this is what the rear end nestled into. This is just a picture of the throttle pedal, again, for reassembly reference. Just another picture of the frame, again, for reference. This would have been the left side of the frame, the saddles for the rear end housing. The rear number 5 cross member had already been taken off. This support that hangs off the frame was actually for the floorboards. It had like 5/16 diamond plate for a floorboard in it. Just another shot of the cross members. Again, all this seemed like, putting it back together, quite a bit of time was going to go by. So again, instead of trying to do this from memory and scratch up new paint, most of these pictures, again, were just hopefully so I could get it together without scratching it all up, because each piece was painted individually. There may be some repeats of pictures. I took so many pictures from one day to the next, it's rough to keep track of what you actually took a picture of. This, I'm actually not quite sure what that's a picture of. That's from the top of the frame rail pointing down. Again, I don't know why I took it, but this is the pivot assemblies for both the brake pedal on one side and the clutch on the other. Clutch on the left, brake on the right. I marked cross member location with a prick punch, marked the frame and the cross members so that I knew right from left and what location. This is the master cylinder bracket that bolts the frame and holds the brake master. I'm not quite sure. I see right and left Oh, those were some angle brackets that were bolted to the frame. Again, I think not quite sure what they actually held, and I may not even have to put them back on, but mark the left side and right side from underneath. Just more of the same. I hadn't started cleaning up or painting yet, obviously. This was all taking place while I was waiting for all the bearings mostly. I already got the wheel seals, and I can't remember. There was an issue getting one bearing or the other out at the wheel end, inner or outer. I was never able to find. Well, I took the frame all apart today. Kind of hung on bearings. I don't want to take anything more apart, motor and transmission wise, until I get the parts for that rear end. Get past that hurdle. But I've had this out here on this table now outside. Used a tractor to set it on this old steel table. I don't know where it came from. But I broke down the frame today. It's all just channel and flat bar, so should be fairly easy to get back together. But this is going to be the easiest way I can find going to have to sandblast the long parts. Maybe the short parts will fit in my glass bead cabinet, but that doesn't work well, and when the air is real humid, it tends to make the glass bead stick to the side of the cabinet and it doesn't flow down the funnel, so it can be more of a pain sometimes than it is a convenience. So we'll wait, later in the fall and the air's drier. We'll either sandblast this or with Black Beauty, or the pieces that'll fit my cabinet we'll do with glass bead. But I don't know, that's it for today probably. I did prime a couple other pieces. This tractor paint takes so long to dry. They want 24 hours between coats, and if you're going to clear over the top of it, they want 14 days. So I'm going to have to keep a log on painting, otherwise I'll never be able to keep it straight when it was primed, when it was given its first coat, second coat, and clear. So I'm not sure I'll clear the frame, but certainly the parts that are exposed, engine block, transmission, housing, rear end housing you don't see much of, just the center section. I'll probably clear on top of those, but I don't think I'll clear on spots you'll never see. But we'll see. We'll take it one piece at a time, I guess. This is just that cross member. I can't remember which side this is, but one of the brake pedal was hung from one side and the clutch pedal hung from the other. So that block that's actually welded to the cross member, the pedal sits on that bolt, and obviously you can grease that shaft. It's actually threaded in the block, and the nut becomes a locking feature so it doesn't turn. But this is just another shot of that same cross member, and you can see the two blocks there. This is the cross member that holds the back of the adapter housing up. That's rigidly bolted to that. So this is one of the first pieces I painted. We started laying down paint with the gun. I bought a gallon of Kubota orange, so you can just see some of the pieces that I was painted. I mean, feels good to start putting some paint down and seeing some color. I didn't have a very good setup for hanging stuff, so I'd paint it outside and then put a bar across the lift and hang parts from that overnight to give it time to cure for either the next coat or sit for 2 weeks before I could clear it. Just some more parts hanging. Okay, this is more for my reference. The rear cross member, the rear cross member, only got paint on one half. So first half a coat done on Labor Day. Cross members 3, looks like I have 2, 3, and 4. That first one is the engine support. That got a coat both sides. First coat, Labor Day. These got a full first coat, Labor Day, along with the master cylinder mount. All got one full coat, Labor Day. So this is more or less just to keep track of when I painted what. So this is just a short video for Dad. The rear bumper, I got half of it coated. I'll have to flip it over and do the other half tomorrow. This is all aerosol right now for these first few coats, small pieces. I did buy some paint today that I can use in the spray gun. Obviously the bigger pieces will take a lot more paint. But the aerosol I found, if you really follow the instructions, work pretty good. So that's the center support. That supports the engine right at the bell housing. That's what those 4 bolts are on that flat. That's where that adapter housing bolts. These are the cross members behind that one. One supports the back of the transmission. One supports the front of the rear axle. And that small one there is the master cylinder mount. That bolts to this cross member right here, I think, which would be number 4, I believe. I didn't count the last one. The front one still, that holds the pivot for the front axle, that's still outside. I haven't touched that one yet. I did separate the pivot from the front axle, pulled the hubs, so I could get the seal number. I'll need a couple of grease seals for the front hubs, but that should be fairly easy. And here's the steering box and the 2, well, I don't know what to call them, side support, relay rods, whatever. They keep that front axle from walking front to back. So they tie into the frame and go out to the outboard end of the front axle, just to, more like an A-frame basically, to keep it rigid. All right, that's it for today. The bearings for the rear axle started to slowly trickle in. I don't remember that 2782 OD is that double roller bearing. That's just the race, and I had to buy the roller separate. And that's how a lot of these bearings were. They weren't bearing sets like there are today, is you had to buy the cup and the cone separately. This is just my setup for starting to actually lay down some paint, mix some, add the hardener, the reducer, and get a spray gun out that I've had for probably 20 years or more, and just actually worked up nerve enough to try it. Alright, this is the right side frame rail. This has a piece of angle iron bolted there. Not sure, I don't remember what it was for. Go down the frame rail. Here's where the step was bolted. These 2 here must have gone to one of the cross members because there was no bolts there. 2 bolts I took out this morning were right here and here. Then we go down the frame rail. And you had the saddle for the rear axle. That I had already unbolted before I remembered that I needed to take a little short video here. So this is the right side frame rail. This here is the support for the step or the platform. These holes, bolts, hold the cross member. These I'm not quite sure. Don't remember. These I definitely don't remember, but that's got to come off as well. This, you see the rear axle saddle. I forgot to get a picture of where the clamp is for the emergency brake cable if I ever get cables on it. I haven't spent much time with them, but I did soak them up pretty good. Hope to get the cable out of the jacket and reuse the jacket. Frame rails here with a coat of paint on them, but you can see the top of the rails heavy pitting. So I had made a decision to skim coat that with Bondo, sand it smooth, and then paint it again, prime it and paint it. These frame rails, you weren't going to see a lot of them, but they were so badly pitted, I just wanted to smooth it up some and make it look a little better. Primers had 24 hours to cure. I mixed up some body filler in several small batches and just laid a coat on the top and what will be the side face. So when I paint it, it will just remove some of the deep pits, make it a little flatter, give it a little more gloss. It'll just look like a better restoration. Not that there's anything wrong with casting. I like the way castings finish. Those definitely look like they were a sand casting. But these straight I-beams, well, channel, actually it looks like 4-inch channel, which are the main rails. There's a lot of those covered up by the running boards. But I just laid a coat on it. We'll let it cure for an hour or two. I didn't mix it up too strong. I've had it go solid right on the cardboard that I was using to mix it. So the hardener I put in a little light so it'll take longer to cure, but I needed the working time in order to spread it on, especially the top surface, this narrow flange. But the 4-inch face took it pretty well with the plastic spreader. So yesterday I quit early. Back, hip was really bothering me. Took it easy today. Actually, I'm still in slippers. Garage door's closed. It's beautiful outside, 72 plus, which is my kind of weather. Air is probably a lot drier today. I haven't been out, but my back and left leg's really been killing me. So taking it easy today. Never gonna get my foundation fixed. I don't know how I'm gonna deal with that, but hopefully the doctor won't drag this out. And recovery time is another concern of mine with this foundation. So I tried going down in there the other day, cutting a little bit of a trench to let some of the water not build up there at the end, but wasn't very successful, I don't think. All right, that's it for today. It's Tuesday, September 21. These pieces on the rack all got their second coat today. So those can sit for 2 weeks if I decide to clear them. I'm not sure. Most of these brackets, except for the main front end to hold the axle, is all going to be under the platform carrier, the operator's platform. So I'm not sure whether I'll clear those or not. I have considered, once I got the frame all together, clearing it as a unit. I'm not sure yet. So these have to wait at least 2 weeks. I got the frame rails. This is the inside. Again, you won't see much of it. This is the axle pivot. that bolts to that front end piece over there via the pin, and then the front axle bolts to those two pads. Plus there's a couple of long tie rods, support rods that tie in from here. If you can see it, I'm standing in my own shadow. From here back to the frame rail to generate an A-frame, so that takes some of the stress off the axle when the wheels are hitting ruts or bumps. So this was a fairly dry coat. I wanted to get it on today. Weather for the rest of the week, they're saying rain definitely tomorrow. I don't know what the weekend holds yet, so I want to take advantage of the 70-degree weather and low humidity. So at least I got a coat on there. The other side, which will be showing, doesn't have any orange on it. There was really no way where I could paint both sides at the same time, so I'll put my two coats of color on those inside of the frame, and then once it dries a little bit, I'll turn it over, put it up on blocks, and paint the side that's going to show. It means 4 different steps, but that's the way it goes, I guess. Later. So this is the gun I've been using. It's one of those high volume, low pressure guns. You can see it's gravity feed. The cup is on top instead of being siphon feed. So I've had this gun probably 10 or more years. I did buy it when I was at Ross. Sandals was having a sale. So I've used a little touch-up gun, which this is a siphon feed gun, but I've always used this for little jobs because the paint cup is small and there's not much cleanup. But these guns, when I bought this gun, there's a kit you can buy so you can put a plastic bag inside here and you suck the air out of it, and then it's kind of like a baby's bottle with the liners. Once you tip the gun upside down and suck the air out of the bag, it's all paint. Then you can shoot at any angle. So upside down, whatever, doesn't bother the gun. You don't get any misses where the siphon tube isn't picking up paint. It'll squeeze every drop of paint out of that bag. Then you just pop the bag out and you run a little thinner through it. I always pull the needle, take the atomizer, the tip off the end, and wash that good, and pull out the tube or the needle. Make sure that's good and clean. So very little cleanup, even with a gun this size. So I had never used it. I was kind of hesitant to learn how to use a new gun. I always went back to my old standby, which was the little door jam or touch-up gun. But once I figured this out the other day, it's really a nice gun to use. Like I say, once you get it set up so you know how to put the plastic bags in and fill it, there is a zip tie across the top. You seal it up, cram it down in the can, put the cover on. Today I had no paint in the can whatsoever once I pulled the bag, so getting the hang of it. So I should have used the gun long before now, but just hesitant to try something new, I guess. That's all, folks. Okay, so I'm getting a few pieces out here in the sun today. Of course, it rained here all day yesterday. It's a little bit of humid feeling this morning because of all the wetness in the ground, but got the parts out, soaking up a little sun. That's the very front cross member axle pivots on those two big holes. Should be pretty obvious. So this is right out in plain sight. So I had given it 2 coats, but unfortunately the side that faces forward was underneath and it was a little dry, so I Scotch Brighted it. We'll put another wet coat on it today. Here are my 2 frame rails and the front axle pivot. This piece is what pivots in that front cross member, and then your front solid axle bolts to these 2 pads here. These are the frame rails. They both received 1 coat 3 days ago. So the way I'm having to do this is 1 coat, minimum 24 hours between each coat. So this is the 2nd coat on this side, then we'll let it cure. I don't know what tomorrow's going to be like. Paint would be dry enough for me to flip these over and give the outside face of this frame its first coat. I want to put it on fairly wet because I'm going to sand it. I want these frame rails to, at least the parts that show, to look as good as possible without going through the issues of really taking the time and using spot putty. And I don't want it to look like sheet metal. I still want it to look like a piece of structural steel, but kind of like to get it as flat as I can so it'd have a little bit of gloss to it. So that's my plan for today. Leave them out all day, probably move them in tonight, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. I will show you how I set up that gun in the next video, but I got to keep them under 3 minutes or I can't send them in Messenger. So all right, see you later. All right, so these are the some of the pieces I need to put in this high volume, low pressure gun. I have the top cover to the aluminum canister. We're still going to use the paint cup. It's just not going to get dirty. In the cover is this little bushing. Down inside the paint cup, you see that brown or black disc at the very bottom. You insert that. That's pressed in, and try and do this with one hand. But this plastic tool here has got a point on it. So you take that and press over that. Again, one hand's not very handy. So that just sits. Let me get it where you can see it. That just sits on the end of this tool, and you see there's a point on it. So once I get ready, that'll go down inside the bag here, and you poke it through the bottom, and then you put the whole bag with this insert inside of it and the insert in the bottom of the can, and that pinches that bag in place. So then you roll it over the outside edges of the cup, pour in your screened paint, primer, whatever you're spraying that day. Then I'll try to squeeze as much air out of it as I can, close the zip top, crunch it up, push it down inside the can, put the cover on. I'll show you once I get to that point. I got to get paint mixed up and thinned and add hardener. That I can't do with one hand. So I got to find my tripod. I know I had the thing that holds my phone at Dublin, so it's probably in my Ford truck. So we'll try getting that set up so you can get a better idea of what's going on here. All right, so paint is mixing that cup with the stick in it. I'm behind the camera right now. The bag is laid out, the tool is laid out, the cover is laid out. The gun is in a cheap little gun holder there on the other sawhorse. So I'll try to get it where we can see everything. I'm not gonna know, I mean in front of the camera, I'm not gonna be able to see what I'm actually shooting. So that's why these guys on YouTube have a big monitor that they're watching while they're shooting the video. Prickner had a major upset. So still use a filter. That goes in this upper ring. This tool doesn't actually fit this gun because I have to hold the cup up like that. So we're gonna modify it a little bit. So this is my paint. Get the stirring stick out of the paint. Okay, so the tool, this is the liner. So you stick that down through, approximately in the center of the bottom, and you poke it right through. So that bushing and the tool is sticking through. So that's what's gonna install it in this bushing that's pushed into the bottom of the cup. So you just push that down in there and it will lock in. Takes quite a bit of pressure. Then you pull the tool out and it all stays in the bottom. So then I'll just take the bag, just like if you were using a pastry bag or something, open it up so you can get the product in the cup. So you can already see how this is going to work. So hold the gun up, my filter. I only mixed 4 ounces of paint. Hope it's enough. This is tractor and implement paint from Tractor Supply. I assume it's an enamel, but I have mixed the hardener with it, along with the 8-to-1 reducer that they sell for this paint. I've been trying not to use products, you know, like DuPont or something like that, enamel reducer, because you don't know how it's going to react with this paint. So I'll just let that drip a bit. It'd be nice if you could walk away and, you know, that cup would stay under that filter, but like I say, it's not quite the right rack. I don't know where I got this thing, probably on Amazon. So the only reason I mix up 4 ounces is it's just a recoat on the front cross member and the pivot assembly. Both of those came out a little dry, and then whatever's left over will go on the inside of the frame rails. So hopefully I can get the outside of the frame rails, at least their first coat, tomorrow. I haven't looked at the long range weather forecast, but so filter comes out, bag, you close up. Yeah, I can take this out of my way. And then I'll start to zipper it. Just like if you were putting a muffin in the refrigerator. Suck out as much, push out as much air as you can before you lock the zipper. And then I haven't had any problem because I'm not spraying upside down. But what DeVilbiss recommends, this is a DeVilbiss cup and their paint liner system, is to turn it upside down. That way the paint will be actually at the top, which becomes the bottom. And then you just sit there and spray it until you start getting some paint that sucks all the air out of it. So like I say, it's just kind of like these modern baby bottles you have today. So right now, this is ready to go. I usually spray a little bit on a piece of cardboard make sure it's not going to spit and sputter. But I am pretty careful when I clean it. That's the only reason this other little gun has lasted 30 years is because I take good care of it. All right, so if I did everything right, when I pull this bag out of here, which you invert the gun and just give the bag a yank, any paint left is still in the bag, which I sucked it pretty well dry. And there's a look inside the paint can. So these whole systems developed by 3M and DeVilbiss and Binks and all your gun manufacturers, basically as paint thinners, reducers, lacquer thinners, all that stuff became bad stuff. As far as the environment's concerned, the whole object of these systems are to reduce waste. You can see I'm going to use very little lacquer thinner to clean this gun. Spray a little bit through it, pull the needle assembly out, pull the spray nozzle off of it. I soak that in lacquer right in the paint cup for a while, then give it a good cleaning with a brush and blow it out, and then blow some lacquer thinner through the gun and you're done. So you can see your byproducts of cleaning your gun are reduced significantly. I mean, old days where paint was in the cup because you moved it all around, the cover would be covered, the whole paint can would be covered. You'd use multiple flushes to get this can cleaned out. The gun part, pretty much you clean it the same way you always did, but you can see this system actually works pretty good. Like I say, I've had this gun for a long time and always hesitated using it because I didn't want to relearn a new process. But when I first started painting this Worthington, I couldn't find my touch-up gun. So I was forced to get this gun out of the box, put it together, and figure out how to use it. So now the setup time is no longer than any other gun, and cleanup is certainly a lot easier. So I would like to get a smaller canister. They make, I only mixed up 4 ounces of paint, and I'm not sure it matters. The bags I have are all fit this, I don't know what this is, 16 ounce or 20 ounce cup. Bags fit that. So if I got a smaller cup, I'd have to get a smaller bag, most likely too. So I got 100 of those bags when I bought the gun, so might as well use them up. So hope that gives you a better idea of the system that I'm using and the cleanup involved. And like I say, it's not an expensive gun, but it's not a cheap gun either. DeVilbiss called this the starting line. You got this and a finished gun. I'm using the priming gun, which is just basically a different tip. So there's 2 guns, 3 tips, 2 cans, and 100 bags. So I should be all set for a while. The big thing about these kind of projects is you're mixing up a ton of small batches and spraying 4, 6, 8 ounces at a time. So, you know, you do a lot of cleanup because you're painting. Not like a car where you'd spray the whole thing at once, but, you know, with these tractors and that stuff where you're spraying one thing at a time, you do a lot of cleaning up, so there is a lot of waste. So those bags kick ass. They're a great little thing. So that goes to show you're afraid of using something new, but actually when you're forced to do it, it actually works pretty good. That's all for now. I'm going to clean up my gun. All right, last coat of paint on this front cross member, 925. Haven't decided whether I'll clear it or not. Depends on how long it takes me to get the main rails done. I'd like to build the frame and clear it all at once, which would, my thought is to leave all the bolts unfinished. Clear those, maybe they'll keep. I'm going to try to use mostly grade 8, so everything that was in this frame, well, actually the whole tractor, everything was built with fine thread. So mean, that's the way they did it back then. Fine thread is harder to come by today, so I'll probably use grade 8 as long as I have it. So this is the second coat on the inside of the frame rails. So those should be done. So now once the paint cures a little bit, I'll flip them over, start on the side that's going to show. The front axle pivot assembly, I don't have a parts manual. There's no manuals on these Worthington tractors at all. At least I can't seem to find any. So this axle pivot has had all the paint it's going to get on 925. So again, whether I clear it or not will depend on how long it takes me to get these main rails completed, sanded, final coat, back together. Now it's rear axle time. I think probably by this point I have all the bearings that I need to put this rear end back together. We'll start pressing them into place and putting it together. I have no idea how to set any of the preloads. It's going to go together one way, and that's going to have to be good enough. I am going to grease pack all these bearings because I have no idea how long it's going to actually sit with no lubricant in it. So I want to make sure for the first few revolutions anyway that we got plenty of grease. The close-ups of these bearing boxes basically just for the group that I belong to, the Worthington Tractor group on Facebook. I find most of these guys have not ever dove into the hard mechanical things about their tractor. They slap a coat of paint on it, and so my plans are to post most of these pictures of these bearing numbers. It just gives somebody, if somebody was in the same predicament as me, I've already done the legwork on finding the bearings and the seals. Not necessarily who to get them from, but at least the modern numbers for those bearings. So I've already done the conversion and done all the legwork. So all they have to do is figure out who to buy them from. So I was fortunate enough to be able to find mostly new old stock. All the Bauer and Timken bearings are all old bearings, which pretty much everything that was in this tractor was all Bauer. First coat paint on the, I don't know what we're going to call this, cross rod for the steering. It's not really a drag link, but it goes from the left front to the right front wheel. Also, first coat of paint on the outside of the frame rails. I don't know, it's fairly wet, but all sorts of bugs got in it this morning. The wind's blowing, which with the wind blowing, I don't know how the bugs found it, but anyway, they got their first coat. If I leave it out all day, I'm going to take some paint. Got a couple of deep scars from when it was rolled over. I was finishing the other side that I want to see if I can fill in with a little paint, and then when I sand it, it'll look a little better. But that won't happen. I'm going to try to dab some paint in them today at the end of the day. I don't know whether we're supposed to get rain today. It looked pretty bad for a while this morning, but it's kind of cleared off. Wind's blowing quite a bit, but we'll dab some paint in and try to fill in some of those low spots. This is just some spot putty after it's painted. Any air bubbles or puck marks in the finish, you can dab in this spot putty and then sand it smooth. So it's basically thick and primer, and it dries really fast, so you can sand it right away and paint over it in a half hour probably. This is Tuesday, October 4th, I guess. Just sanded these rails down, applying a little spot putty. Hopefully it'll be warm enough tomorrow to paint. These, because I've done so much sanding, this is going to require 2 coats, so 24 hours apart. So hopefully Wednesday and Thursday be warm enough to paint. All right, Wednesday, October 5th maybe. Second coat on the steer and drag link, plus those flat bars for the rear axle. Wednesday, October 5th. One very wet coat on the frame rails and those U-bolts. The underside's been painted twice. Paint laid down nice today, so I don't know, I may consider this a final coat. I did put it on fairly heavy, so give it time, plenty of time to cure. I think we'll call this the rails done. So for the first time in a long time, we're actually starting to put it back together. Frame went together pretty nice. Again, I got it on a table in the shop, on a U-Haul blanket, and trying to be gentle with the paint because it's still fairly green. So put together as much as we can without hurting it. Starting to dry fit some of the frame components. Figure out what I need for hardware, what I have for hardware. I'm going to replace all the bolts, preferably with grade 8. I just think the gold finish will look better against the orange paint. The zinc wouldn't have been that bad at all either, but trying to keep it all grade 8. Everything came off this frame was mostly grade 5, but all fine thread. Every bolt was fine thread, so fine thread isn't as easy to get today. Usually have to buy box quantities to get fine thread, so I'll see. I've got most of the hardware here. Like right now, the only thing I'm missing is some SAE flat washers. I got USS flat washers, but they're so friggin' big that I just never like the fit of a USS washer on a bolt, so especially a grade 8 bolt. So ordered a bag of 3/8 flats and locks and a bag of 1/2 inch flats and locks. That's what most of the hardware is here. There's a few 5/8s, very few. Most of it's 1/2 and 3/8, so should be in good shape. This is a new pin that I made for the front axle. It did take up a lot of wear. I think this pin was about 12 thousandths oversized, and it fit pretty good at that. New oversized axle pin installed. It's only about 12 thousandths over 1 inch. This was originally a 1 inch. The part right here that the pin rides in and doesn't rotate in, there's a brass bushing in the axle here. That actually isn't as worn as the bracket itself. The hole's a little bit elongated here, so technically I was heading for a 10 over pin, but when I pulled it off the lathe, it was 12 thousandths oversized, and it fit really good. So a little bit of work to get it through the bronze bushing, but a little bit of grease slid right in. So, there's a little bit of wear in that axle, but not as much as you might think. Have no idea the hours on the machine, but you would think that would be pretty worn. but it's really not. So who knows? Who knows how much this machine was used? Bolted on some more stuff. Flat bar sits on the spring pads of the rear axle. Put the trailer hitch on, and I believe it has an umbrella stand as part of the hitch. Bolted the master brake cylinder on. Put in some missing hardware because I was waiting for grade 8 SAE flat washers. Tightened up the, I don't know what you want to call this. It stabilizes this front pivot and takes the force of dropping a wheel into a rut or something and transmitting it back to the frame without putting all the pressure on the central pivot point. So, new pin is in. Like I say, tightened up all that stuff. All the hardware is tight, basically, at this point. Paint is still so friggin' soft. I don't know if it's ever going to harden. I finally have just started tightening stuff down, and it is what it is, I guess, or otherwise I'll be waiting until spring. All right. The top of the spindle has a flat on top. That's the left side. Just took the right side apart. There's the spindle there in the shadows. The bearing was on the bottom. The two caps. The shim was on top. Obviously, with the groove on the kingpin, it can only go in one way. So there's the kingpin and the locking device. This is just the front axle getting ready for paint. It's all cleaned up. Most of the cleanup I did with wire brush and a 4.5-inch grinder. This is just some of the steering linkage. I was pretty torn on whether I would mix and match colors, orange and black, or whether I'd just paint everything orange. Finally decided that steering linkage, the spindle, knuckle, whatever you want to call it, I decided to paint black. Hubs will be painted orange. Wheel hubs will be painted orange. Then I have black lug nuts. The wheel looks like it originally was white. I don't know if I'll paint the wheel black or white. All right, knocked the kingpins out yesterday. Now the spindles have been painted, sandblasted and painted black. I really wanted to get the steering arms out and maintain the orange through the steering linkage, but I just couldn't get them out. I didn't want to spoil them, so I put the nuts back on and painted the whole thing black. That's the first coat. This is Rust-Oleum semi-gloss black. I'll get a couple coats and see what it looks like. My intentions are to paint the hubs black as well. The wheels, what I'm seeing according to the paint that's on them is the wheels were white, so I don't know whether I'll go white or not. It'll depend on how they clean up, I guess. White's gonna be a hard color to keep clean, but we'll see. I assume these are Ford wheels. I'd like to find some Ford hubcaps for the front. The back is a full floating rear axle, so I'm not sure what I might find for that. They are 16-inch wheels, but I doubt you could probably find anything more than beauty rings, but we'll see. We'll keep looking.
Oh, looks like it's rear end assembly time. Looks like I have all my components, and I think I've been dreading it, mostly because I didn't really know what I was doing. But we're just going to start putting bearings together and checking the fit, and as long as it's not too tight, I don't really think I can do anything about the looseness. I can add gaskets to loosen the preload, but I can't tighten them up any more than they are, so we're just going to put it together and see how it goes. This is just the wheel bearings. I decided one side of the wheel bearings pretty pitted, so I put wheel bearings in both hubs and new grease seals, of course. So it was kind of a weird pairing up of cups and cones. I actually had to buy a complete bearing and rob the race and put another cup in to get the diameters right. So this is the rear end. Again, back to the rear end. So it's going together now. I worked up bravery enough to actually tackle it and start installing bearings and races and trying to get that clamshell back together. This just shows the pinion shaft, the double nut affair that actually sets your preload and then locks that nut down. She's finally all together. It is quite heavy, so the only way I figured out how to move it around is stand it up on a pallet truck, hand truck, and move it around that way. This just shows the front axle's been reassembled, spindles on, front hubs are on with their new bearings and seals, just awaiting wheels.
I got the front end together today for the most part. Axles bolted up, kingpins in, spindles on, hub with new bearings, old seal installed, drag link, left or right spindle is installed. Nuts are tight. I'll have to paint those with a brush, black, and then put new cotter pins in them. Got to do the dust caps, which I don't know. I was going to do them orange, but I'm not sure. You know, if you use a hammer, obviously, to set them, you'll have to go back and touch them up anyway. So I may spray them part way and then finish them up after they're in. So good day. Back's awful sore. I don't know, it's getting worse. So epidural certainly not even what I would consider a temporary fix. I had one good week, so we'll see.
This is just backing plates after they've been blasted and painted.
Rear brake backing plates. All the hardware was removed, except for the adjusters. I'm not sure of those. They probably come out somehow, but I left those in. Self-etching primer on bare steel. I sandblasted them down to bare steel, both sides. So the shoe side is also painted, primed and painted. Self-etching primer and semi-gloss black. This is Monday or Saturday. Every day Saturday.
This is just that dashboard. I'm going to start stripping that so that I can get that painted. Starter solenoid, fuel filter, air cleaner. Removed all that. That's just a close-up of the starter solenoid. That would be the engine side of that dashboard. This is just a shot of that oil bath air cleaner bolted to what I'm calling the dashboard. So this is probably another one just for reference. This is just my wheel hubs installed, front wheel hubs with the dust caps. I decided to paint those black and was able to find a pair of what they call black chrome lug nuts. So that'll look pretty good against white or black wheel, whatever, or orange wheel, I guess. White or orange. Won't paint them black. And we'll see what they look like. To be determined. I got my black chrome lug nuts today. The cone is a little small. It'll be fine on the front, but I don't think they're going to work for the rear. I'll have to come up with something else. But these were relatively cheap, and they're spline. They come with a special socket. I just wanted something black and solid. I didn't want the end of the lug nuts or the actual stud. I didn't want that to show. This is just some Newcastle nuts for the tie rods. I decided to install new ones because obviously I had hit them with a hammer to get them apart. But all this kind of stuff, I'm sure it's all China. This stuff is readily available from a million different suppliers, and So this is a low pressure brake switch that'll actually screws right into the output on the brake master cylinder. Can't tell what that is. Bag's turned the wrong way. That's the brake switch part number. This is the battery box. After it's been sandblasted, first coat of primer. These are the U-bolts that actually tie the differential to the frame rails. This is that steering box mount, bolts to the back of the tranny plus a cross member and supports the steering box. These are the drip trays in the rear wheels. They must expected those wheel seals to leak a little bit. This is the steering arm from the steering box to the left side spindle. That's just a close-up. This is just a shot of the other end. This is that dashboard that holds the air filter and the fuel filter and the starter solenoid. That's the pitman arm with a fresh coat of paint on it. Parts are starting to stack up that have been painted. Like I say, it's 2 weeks before you can clear coat them, so I have to have a part staged for before and after clear coat, so hard to keep it all straight. Those are probably the bolts that hold the steering box to that bracket on the tranny. This is a Model A stoplight. I decided to add a stoplight, and this one illuminates the word stop. You know, I'm sure it's another Chinese part, and it's fairly low quality, so they're a dime a dozen. This is just a picture of the fan had been painted, and that is the back side of the water pump. Pretty pitted, but I think it'll be alright. So this is the front side of the water pump with a coat of primer on it. Next stop, paint. This is just a shot of some of the pieces that have been painted. I need a bigger table. Parts are starting to stack up. Just some more painted parts. Parts and parts and parts. Hope I can remember where they all go. This is the top of the transmission tower. That little pin you'll see later, it was worn almost halfway through, so there was a lot of slop in that stick. You really had to hunt for each gear because it wanted to rotate on you. So there's the ball, the slot in the ball that keeps it from spinning, engages with that pin, but that pin was worn almost halfway through on one side. There we go. There's a shot of that pin. So you can imagine how much slop there was in that stick. So I'm sure this shot is a piece that's been clear coated and hung up to dry. That's the throttle pedal. That's been painted black, obviously primed, sandblasted. Anything I could get in the cabinet, I sandblasted inside. That's a headlight ring. Was going to try and reuse the lights that were on the tractor, but they were pretty tender once you started hitting them with sand. This is just this is what the seat was bolted to, so it's like a 4-inch riser, and then the seat was bolted to that. This is just another shot of the headlights. I'm sure those long bolts were what held that seat riser to the main support. Another picture of the dashboard, I'm not sure why. This is just a shot of the coil bracket after it's been painted. Alright, primed these yesterday, the headlights. This I'm going to use for a rear light. It's one of the original lights. So, I got primed yesterday in gray. First coat of black semi-gloss on that today. That I'm just letting hang. I'm going to weld up a couple of end caps on that seat riser. Clear coated the battery tray today with lacquer clear coat, aerosol. The coil bracket assembly and the footrest. Got a coat of gloss black today, did semi-gloss yesterday as a base. Then we'll let that cure for several days. I don't know if I'm going to wait 14 days, but been trying the lacquer clear coat over the Rust-Oleum and have had no issues as long as the paint is cured. That's pretty much it for today. Did do the bolts for the seat riser, painted the heads and painted the nut black. Just to get a head start on those. You won't see the middle part of the bolt. I welded the ends of the seat riser. I capped them with 10 gauge radius to corner today.
All right, shot some. This has been in the cellar here warming up for 24 hours. Shot some clear coat on that today. That is the left side. Goes from the rear cross member bumper up to the left side differential. That sits right on the spring pad there, and those two bolts have a U-bolt that goes around the axle housing the tube and has a couple of nuts. That sits on the factory spring pad. Now these are just some covers I was able to find at the Ford store. They go over those serviceable ball, I don't know, ball and trunnion or whatever, but those joints that you can take apart on both ends of the steering arm, from the pitman arm to the left front spindle. Those just keep moisture and crap out of that joint. That's that seat riser. Painted, I don't know, first coat, second coat, can't really tell from here. This is just a picture of the backing plates with all the hardware back on them. But I think I had made a decision at that point to just scuff them up a little bit. The side that was going to show, painted them with gloss black and then cleared them. The thing is, if you're putting gloss over semi-gloss paint, I mean, it looks like gloss paint anyway. It has a shine to it, so might as well paint it with gloss black. Wednesday to begin with. I had originally painted these backing plates semi-gloss black. Where I'm clearing everything, I decided to paint it gloss black, so it got its coat of gloss black today, along with the other side, of course. This is the left side over here. That's my seat riser block. That got a coat of semi-gloss black today as a base coat, and then I'll do a gloss coat over that, and then eventually a clear. So the reason I decided to do the backing plates in clear, in gloss black, is I'm gonna spray them with clear lacquer, toughen them up some. So I just figured the clear gloss would look better over clear, gloss black than semi-gloss black. So there we go. All right, I tried a little experiment today. Put a clear coat, lacquer clear coat over this Rust-Oleum that was painted on 1218. See no issues, no wrinkling of the paint. Seem to accept it really good. So I don't have to wait as long as I thought. Of course, it cures probably better in here than it does certainly in the fall with cooler temps, but so far so good. So the bracket, mount, the coil strap, and the footrest got a coat of clear today. Uh, 1223. This was painted on 1219, last coat of black. Sprayed it with clear coat lacquer today. No issues. So it's been about a week. So I don't have to stretch it out 14 days. I have to give it time, and I imagine it depends on how thick the finish coat was as well. So far so good. I'll give the backing plates another week or so, then I may spray them. I would think anything with clear on it is probably going to last a little longer.
12:27, I guess, Monday. Pulled the transmission and bell housing away from the engine, drained the transmission, not a drop of water in it, which is surprising. With the rear end as tough shape as it was, which was basically every bearing was burned right out of the thing. The transmission is perfect, not a drop of water in it. Gear oil's nice and clean, rotates smoothly, shifts all the gears. After I put the pin in it that keeps the stick from turning, it shifts beautiful. So I don't think we're going to have any problems there. I'll pull the bell housing away from the front of the transmission so that I can finish wire brushing both pieces. Hopefully get them into the heated side of the house and get them warmed up enough so that I can get them painted. The rear end is over there now, but I don't know, it's such a big piece. I'd really like to paint it all together, so I may wait till spring, early summer, depending on what happens with my back. Here's the back of the bell housing. With this Continental, there's a huge adapter plate on the back of this engine, and I'm sure this plate changes with whatever application. If it was in a welder, it might have a different one. If it was in stationary application where there might have been a PTO shaft coming off the back or a belt pulley, I'm sure it might have a different adapter housing. This one was obviously set up to take that Ford bell housing. I'm hoping the disc is not bad. The rivets are pretty close on one side, on the pressure plate side. If I can find a disc, I may try and get one. At this point, I probably wouldn't change the pressure plate. I'll get it cleaned up and see what shape it's in. Pilot bearing feels pretty good. It is a bearing. You can see where it's throwing some of the grease, so it looks like it's pressed into the flywheel, not the end of the crank. So I'll pull that flywheel off and knock it out of there and see if I can repack that. Throwout bearing seems good. Shit. All right, I gotta stop. This is just the oil filter housing, the canister, and I'm sure the next shot will be the cover that's with their coat of primer on them. I was using Rust-Oleum primer under all this paint. I did buy some primer from Tractor Supply, but in a can, so as long as I was using aerosol, I was using a spray primer. These are some headlights that I found. This is just a shot of the tranny, pretty well cleaned up. Been able to hit all sides with a wire brush on a 4.5 inch grinder. This is the bell housing. Again, once they were separated, I was able to get all the spots that I wasn't able to get when they were bolted together. This is inspection cover on the bell housing to service or lubricate the throwout bearing. This is the bell housing inspection cover, primed today, 12:30. Thursday, I believe. Bell housing repair done with nickel, and the TIG welder had a crack all the way from down in here all the way up to here. It was actually cracked across this bolt hole.
which I opted to leave that alone. I pushed my luck as far as that goes. Heard one little ting. I haven't seen any cracks, but I certainly heard it make a noise. It's pretty well stabilized temperature-wise. I'm going to get a coat of primer on it today. Again, that's 12/31 Thursday. Painted the first coat of orange today. Had primer on it, sat for 2 days. I didn't do anything on it yesterday because of New Year's Eve. Let's see what else we got. We painted the oil canister and its cover, which is over there by the bell housing, in gloss black. So this will be the third coat. This got it semi-gloss black today, which that's the procedure I've been using so I can keep track. Gray primer, semi-gloss black, and then gloss black on top of that, and then eventually clear after they sit long enough. So those are the pieces I did today. I had them ready. I did weld the crack in that bell housing. I don't know if I did it or some of it was already there. I had missed a couple of bolts taking it apart, and I had to put some pressure on it, so maybe I did it all. I know the crack between the bolt hole and the edge were already there. So there's the top to the oil canister. It is kind of dusty in here. I may have to sand it or Scotch Brite it and put another coat of black on. That's the trouble with the stove. As soon as you open the door, you kick up dust. It's nice to preheat things. I keep my paints warm on a couple of fire bricks, so they're ready to spray. But it is dusty down here. This was painted with orange, final coat on 12/19, so I think it's ready for clear coat today. This is just a shot of the headlight brackets post that I made. This was made out of all that 10 gauge, that 5-inch wide 10 gauge that I still have left. It took 6 pieces, individual pieces, welded all together, and then dressed the welds with a flap wheel to make it look like one solid piece. These next few shots are just me holding up those headlight posts. The original headlights were bolted to the side of the hood, which I wanted to get rid of all that. So these will be bolted to the side of that frame rail, and the lights will sit right on top. These are just a few shots of the headlight posts actually bolted to the front of the frame. I kind of like them. Not quite sure how the scale will be once I get everything bolted together, but I think they'll be fine. These were all TIG welded, by the way. Oh, this is just a shot of that adapter housing with a coat of primer on it. Now we're getting into the engine. This is the timing cover, sandblasted and primed after it's been removed from the engine. The engine is now in the warm side of the cellar where I can work on it. Did the clear coat today on the headlights. They've been sitting 2 weeks, so they were certainly ready for that clear lacquer. Painted the headlight brackets, their second coat of orange. They've been a couple weeks, but this may require 3 coats on these. I originally had painted them black, and then I changed my mind after doing them. So the headlights will be black, and all the attaching hardware will be black, and I don't know, I'll see if I can find some, I'd like to find some metal chrome-ish conduit for the wiring, because that's going to follow the bracket down to the chassis. So just got the second coat today. Painted the bottom of this adapter housing today, and that's where I'll start out with the orange. I will paint the bottom first and let that go a couple of days, then I can stand it up and get a coat on the rest. It's going to add an extra day to every step, but there's no way I can do the whole thing and get the bottom done. So the thing is just so ungodly heavy. I got all I can do to move it around with 2 hands, so this is how it's going to have to be. Did the primer on this yesterday. It's been here in the cellar all last night and today. So I basically just put a light orange coat. I'm not sure how much of this is going to show from the other side. I think somewhere in these areas might extend out past the block, but it's on the bottom. This is the mount for the front of the engine, so you're going to have to get down. If anything got missed in orange, you'd have to get down on your knees to see it, but I always thought that the paint made a good gasket sealer as well, so I've never been afraid to paint gasket surfaces. I wouldn't do that to a head gasket, but paper gaskets, I'm fine. Coat of paint can't do anything but help. First quarter orange on this today, front timing cover. This is Saturday, I don't know, June 21 or whatever. Don't really know or care. First quarter orange on this adapter housing, Saturday, June 21, question mark, question mark. This is only one half. The thing is so heavy. I'm going to have to flip it over to do the other side. It's been, I don't know, 3 or 4 degrees for the last couple days. It's pretty warm right in here close to the stove, but I may give this an extra day before I flip it over, because if you have to handle it pretty hard because it's so freaking heavy. So maybe stand it up where I can get both sides after this, or do the other side and do the bottom a second coat. Then I can stand it up and do both sides. So either or. Well, this is the second coat of orange on the timing cover, 123.22, and painted the other side of the adapter housing. So the entire housing has one coat. The bottom does have 2 coats. I was able to do the bottom and the sides in both positions, so those will actually have a 3rd coat on them, but I'm going to have to do the second coat the same way, one half, flip it over the other half. So tomorrow, because I've got it sitting right next to the stove, so tomorrow I'll paint this side, let it sit overnight, flip it, and do the other side. Then it'll be done, sit for 2 weeks, and wait for clear coat. Coated the oil pan today. Today's Monday. I'm not sure, 23rd, 24th. But we'll let this sit a couple days, give it 1 coat of orange paint, maybe 2. Today, 124, Monday. Gave the adapter housing its 2nd coat of orange. So we'll wait 14 days and then give it a light dust and a clear. Timing cover's already been painted its 2nd coat, so maybe I'll wait and do all of them at the same time.
This is pretty heavy, so I have to do this inside. There's no moving it once it's wet. So we'll clear this and the timing cover at the same time. Oil pan got to paint a coat of primer today. This is just getting the engine off the floor. I had it on the floor and trying to work on it, humped over, not great for my back, so dragged it out where I could get a hold of it with the tractor and picked it up, put slings around the crankshaft and picked it up and set it on this little rolly cart that I have. It's an old one, but it's still pretty solid. So that was just going to allow me to move the engine around out of my ways while I'm working on it and waiting for bearings. Second coat of orange paint on the oil pan. I am not quite sure how I'll proceed with it. I'll clear it before I put it on the engine. I did end up ordering a set of rod bearings for it. The clearances were right at 2 thousandths, which was the extreme. It's 1.5 to 2. So I found a set of rod bearings for it for $11 and change a piece. So at this point, you know, what's another $45? So I did order them this morning. I expect it'll take a week or two to get here, but in the meantime, I get caught up on my paint work. So oil pan got its second coat today. Today is 125, maybe 126. I'm not sure. It is Friday. So there we go. So the next paint project is going to be this transmission. I mean, it's heavier than hell. I did get it up on those all right, but I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it after it's painted. Probably put it on a creeper or something, roll it around. The bottom's going to get scuffed up, but once it's in the tractor, I can kind of scratch it with some, oh, I forgot the name now, but and give it a final coat of paint. I probably will not clear this until it's in the tractor. Depends on how I can handle it.
Alright, engine sitting up here on a shop cart. I used the larger plastic gauge today and rechecked these bearings. There was a confusion on the bearings at Gen Sales. They gave me a price of $147 and change for 4 rod bearings. So I opted to check the plastic gauge readings again today. All I had was the red left, which is 2 to 5 maybe thousandths, which this is 1.5 to 2. They were running, the 2 I checked were running right at 2, so which probably would have been all right. Run a good grade of oil. But Ag Kits had the bearings for, I don't know, $11 and change a piece. So I ordered a set along with some assembly lube today, and we'll roll a new set of rod bearings in it. Just help keep it quieter. So I can't do much on the engine until I get those. I can do a little wire brushing on the back. That's still got some paint on it. But you know, after I do my transmission, this will be the next thing to get a coat of paint. The transmission bell housing and the adapter housing are all painted. The bell housing's been cleared. The adapter housing needs to wait another week. So this will be the next thing. When I get the adapter housing back on it and the flywheel bolted back on, then I can reinstall it on my engine stand, which I'm not sure there'll be any advantage to that other than the fact that I'll be able to roll it around. But in the heated side of the cellar here, we're getting pretty cramped for space, so I should be doing the rear end next, getting that painted and cleared, and then I could set that into the chassis and that would free up some space. But like an idiot, we're going in the wrong direction. All right, it's 1:31 Monday. Gave the transmission its first coat of orange paint. We'll let this sit for 2 days. It's kind of cool in this room, and we'll give it a second coat. Started painting bolts today. Bell housing bolts, timing cover bolts, all this kind of stuff. Oil pan bolts, all going to be painted black, so they'll stand out against all the orange. So it's an extra step, but really does look nice when it's all done. This is the stick shift with a coat of primer on it. Nothing too exciting. Not quite sure why I needed 2 pictures of that, I guess, but all my pictures are stored in the cloud, and when I download them, I just download them all at once. This is the little timing cover. You roll that up, and engine side of the flywheel's got timing marks on it, so you time it through that hole. February 1st, painted the 3 starter bolts, the timing cover bolts, and the dashboard bolts that hold the dashboard to the top of the adapter housing. They got a coat of semi-gloss black today. I'll only paint these with one coat, and then I'll touch them up after I've turned them in with a wrench or a socket. Also gave the stick shift handle its first coat of semi-gloss and painted the timing cover and bolt gloss black today. February 1st, Tuesday. Put the second coat of orange on today. Felt pretty good, so I scuffed it up best I could and sprayed second coat. The top got a pretty wet coat. The sides, again, I didn't want any runs. Not that you'll see much of this transmission, probably just the top cover. But put, I don't know, kind of two light coats, one after the other. I don't know how fast this paint flashes off, but I didn't have any runs that I could see so far. So February 1, second coat. 14 days later, it'll get a clear coat. So that'll be January 15th. This is February 2nd.